The result was fairly predictable there. There's just almost 80% said that they agreed that these companies should in fact exercise greater control somehow or other. No surprises there, really.
So what's your overall conclusion about these attitudes to diversity from the poll?
Well, I was just listening to what one of the other panel members said about the level of acceptance of diversity amongst New Zealanders. What was it? It was 17%. I actually look at it slightly differently, because we measured New Zealanders' opinions of whether they think New Zealanders generally are accepting of different cultures and religions using a scale. So it ran from obviously a total acceptance through to no acceptance whatsoever. And really the perfect result that we would all want is that we would get 100% of everyone saying that New Zealanders are totally accepting. That if you like is nirvana. But we didn't actually get that. We got a lot of people at each end of that scale. And the way I look at it is that in addition to noting the number who said New Zealanders are not accepting of different cultures and religions, I also think we need to take into account the number of people who sat on the fence. And when you do that, and they were over a third of everyone that we spoke to was sitting on the fence. They weren't prepared to say that New Zealanders are accepting of different cultures and religions.
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you take them into account, I think New Zealanders are polarised. We've got roughly half and half saying they're accepting, and the other half are saying I'm unsure, or I'm definitely sure that they're not accepting of different cultures and religions. An
interesting way to end this this panel. Emmanuel Kalafatalis, partner from Research NZ. Thank you so much for being with us. So responses to that, Ganesh, what are your thoughts? It's been the theme really of the whole hour. New Zealanders are polarised.
I think that's probably stretching it a bit, but I think there are a significant group of New Zealanders who are confused, are in their comfort zone and not quite sure why they have to accept all these other things happening and would prefer to stay to themselves. I think it does depend a little bit on what you mean by what sort of diversity you're looking at when you're talking about culture and religion. I think you'll have a significant number of New Zealanders who will be comfortable with dare I say, European type cultures and religions that they're more comfortable with than others, and I think so. It's right. Probably more of a spectrum rather than one or the other.
Very quick response, Gonas.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think New Zealanders may be polarised, but I think generally we have a passive nature, so it's unlikely that we are really forceful with our views on diversity. But it's insidious and it's in an undercurrent, and that's what we've got to watch out for.
Ganesh Nana and Gonas Tabambasar, you have been both wonderful on the panel this afternoon. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
And I'm Wallace Chapman. I'm back tomorrow from 3:45. Checkpoint next.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, as of 2 hours ago, it is illegal to own an assault rifle or a military-style semi-automatic. High-capacity magazines and other modifications are on the way out too. The amnesty clock is ticking as the government prepares to launch a buyback scheme. Police say all 50 of the mosque shooting victims have now been formally identified and can be released to their families. At least 15 have been farewelled today. We're in Christchurch at Latimer Square as churches of all denominations gather for a prayer service, and members of Auckland's Muslim community travel to Christchurch to say thank you to first responders who helped the wounded and dying. RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leia tawa tēnei.
All military-style semi-automatic and assault rifles have been banned in New Zealand. High-capacity magazines and parts that can be converted into military-style arms are also banned. That covers every weapon used in last Friday's mosque attack. The Prime Minister says changes to the Arms Act are expected to become law by April the 11th. In the meantime, no one will be able to buy such weapons without an e-endorsement on a firearms licence. But Jacinda Ardern says anyone seeking an endorsement will be wasting their time.
I acknowledge and thank those retailers who have voluntarily ceased to sell military-style semi-automatic and assault rifles. You will have seen the collective issues we face as a country and reacted swiftly, and I thank you for that. For other dealers, sales should essentially now cease.
Jacinda Ardern says there will be an amnesty for weapons to be handed in, and Cabinet has directed officials to come up with a buyback scheme. The National Party is pledging to work constructively with the government to implement the changes. Its leader, Simon Bridges, says he agrees that members of the public do not need access to military-style semi-automatic weapons and assault rifles. He says he also supports limiting access to other high-powered semi-automatic weapons and ammunition.
I think now is a time for unity in New Zealand. I think now is a time when we've got to act in the national interest to make sure New Zealanders are safe.
Simon Bridges. The Police Commissioner is urging people to voluntarily give up their banned firearms or face prosecution. Mike Bush says they must contact the police either online or over the phone to arrange a buyback.
There is an amnesty or a grace period, so we'll be working with everyone to ensure we give them every assistance to take those firearms off them, get them out of circulation and into a place of safekeeping, so those firearms can never be used again in an act of violence so horrific as we saw last Friday.
Mike Bush. The Police Association is applauding the weapons ban. Its president, Chris Cahill, says the government has demonstrated great courage.
It's a good mix of reforms that balance the practical requirements of firearm owners in New Zealand with the need to protect society, and we're very pleased.
Chris Cahill says the changes are the minimum officers would expect. The police are investigating allegations of serious breaches in their vetting of the accused Christchurch killer for his firearms licence. A former head of firearms control for the police has alleged they did not follow the required procedure to ensure only fit and proper persons are able to buy and use guns. John Gerritsen reports.
In an article published on a firearms safety site today, it's claimed that the police failed to interview a close relative or partner of the accused man, as they're required to do before granting a licence. It says the two people they did interview knew him only through an online chat room. The article says the police did not interview the man in his home, as they're required to do, but at his place of work, and there's doubt that a home visit and inspection of his security measures took place. The Police Commissioner has declined to comment on the allegations at this time. I Ototahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
More funerals were held in Christchurch today for those gunned down 6 days ago. 7 people were buried in a special plot set aside in the city's east. Conan Young reports.
Among those laid to rest today were 14-year-old Kashmir High School student Sayed Ahmad Milne. A former student of the same school, 24-year-old Tariq Rashid Omar, was laid to rest at the same time. A recent convert to Islam, Linda Armstrong, was also farewelled. She was known as a pillar of the community, having worked with refugees for many years. Taxi drivers have been on hand outside the funeral services offering free rides to people. A mass burial of the remaining victims will take place tomorrow afternoon. Kei Ototahi aho, ko Conan Young tēnei.
Meanwhile, 2 of the 6 people in intensive care in Christchurch Hospital since the mosque massacre have been moved out of intensive care. The Canterbury DHB says 1 person has also been discharged since yesterday, leaving a total of 29 shooting victims still in hospital. A 4-year-old girl taken to Starship Hospital is still in a critical but stable condition. In other news, a judge says it's only by the narrowest margin that a man who breached suppression in a sexual assault case has escaped a conviction. Kerry Bolton was a supporter of the Kapiti District Councillor David Scott, who was last year found guilty of indecently assaulting a council staff member. The day after the guilty verdict, Bolton rang a talkback radio station and named the victim, who had statutory name suppression. He pleaded guilty to the breach last year, but in the Porirua District Court today sought discharge without conviction. Judge Ian Mill said Bolton had shown no remorse for the impact of naming the woman, who ultimately gave up her job, and ordered him to pay her $1,500 as emotional harm reparation. It's 5:05. Rugby League veteran Benji Marshall is urging the NRL to consider a South Island team if it decides to relocate struggling Sydney clubs. The debate about expansion and relocation has reignited, with the NRL preparing a report into the viability of adding a 17th and 18th NRL franchise. Marshall's club, the West's Tigers, along with Manly and Cronulla, are mentioned as clubs most likely to be moved. But Marshall, a 26-test Kiwi veteran, wants a second New Zealand side, either in Wellington or the South Island, to be considered. Marshall says next season 50% of the players will be Kiwi or Polynesian, indicating the growing depth of the game in New Zealand. The Australian women's AFL star Tala Harris says she won't make a complaint to police over disparaging and sexist comments made about her on social media. Channel 7 removed a photo of the Carlton player from its social media accounts because of the comments from online trolls, but later reposted it and apologised for sending the wrong message by taking it down. Harris described the comments as sexual abuse, but won't take the matter up with the police and is confident the incident will lead to change.
Whether they see the comment on their newsfeed or whatever of a family member or a friend and they call them out and they feel like they can now because I've been able to start the conversation, then that's good.
Taylor Harris, and that's the news.
A white nationalist threat overlooked.
If you look at the profile of the extreme right, many of these people leave fingerprints beforehand, and yes, I think a mistake's been made.
Self-reflection in Parliament.
I'm including all of us. We're on notice now. We have to be very, very careful about whether or not we're fanning the flames of division.
And Muslim families bury their dead.
Supporting Muslims really getting through this time is actually providing them the space to actually grieve with their loved ones and so forth.
From Christchurch, Morning Reports, weekdays 6 till 9. Then on 9 to noon, how much we pay for power is under review. So what can consumers expect this winter? Then after 10, 2018 American Pulitzer Prize-winning author of Less, Andrew Sean Greer. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland, fine spells and isolated showers. Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, fine apart from isolated showers tomorrow. Waikato through to Taranaki, including Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Taumaranui and Taihape, mainly fine. Isolated showers in the afternoons and evenings. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy periods and the odd shower, becoming fine about the coast tomorrow afternoon. Whanganui to Wellington, also Waited Upper, mainly fine but cloudy periods and the odd shower about Waited Upper today. For all of the South Island except Fiordland, fine, apart from areas of cloud or fog, especially morning and night. For Fiordland, a few showers in the west, cloudy periods elsewhere. And at the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It's 5:08. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna, and you're listening to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Less than a week after New Zealand's deadliest terror attack, the government has effectively banned all sales of military-style semi-automatic weapons and all assault rifles immediately. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, unveiled the plans at Parliament this afternoon, saying the time for mass and easy availability for these weapons must end. We have extensive coverage from Christchurch tonight and we'll go there shortly, but first, here's our political reporter Craig McCulloch.
The Prime Minister promised gun laws would change less than 24 hours after the Christchurch mosque attacks. Now we know by how much.
Every semi-automatic weapon used in the terrorist attack on Friday will be banned in this country.
Jacinda Ardern announcing a ban on all military-style semi-automatics and all assault rifles. The same goes for high-capacity magazines and any parts used to upgrade or convert firearms into that military style. The only semi-automatics still available will be 22s and shotguns, primarily used by farmers.
We've targeted here the guns that are actually doing the harm in our community, and we saw that on Friday.
Legislation will be rushed through under urgency, the laws to be in place within 3 weeks. In the meantime, ministers have signed an order, meaning buyers would need police permission to buy any of the affected weapons.
I can assure people there is no point in applying for such a permit.
As of this afternoon, some accessories, including the high-capacity magazines, are still for sale online. But the Police Minister, Stuart Nash, has a message for anyone thinking of stocking up.
These are going to be illegal in 3 weeks' time. So don't waste your money.
Australia introduced a buyback scheme when it banned all semi-automatics after the Port Arthur massacre in 1996. New Zealand is to follow suit. Officials estimate the cost at between $100 and $200 million.
That is the price that we must pay to ensure the safety of our communities.
The government wants anyone who owns the now forbidden firearms to declare them on the police website. Those who keep illegal weapons could face up to 3 years in prison, and that penalty is set to rise too. Ministers will next week also consider other changes, including gun registration.
It is a privilege and not a right to own a firearm in New Zealand.
The gun control clampdown has the backing of all 3 government parties, including New Zealand First. It's a remarkable shift in position for a party which has long championed gun rights, but as its leader Winston Peters flagged on Monday, everything has changed.
After 1 p.m. on the 15th of March, our world changed forever, and so will some of our laws.
Support too from the opposition leader Simon Bridges, the National Party, also friendly with the firearm community, swinging behind the changes.
National supports the changes, and we're going to work constructively with the government.
In the beating sun outside Parliament this morning, supporters of gun control gathered. Brad Newstub helped start a petition. The signatures ultimately numbered nearly 70,000. He hopes New Zealand's action will set an example for the world.
Hopefully it would send a message around the world that this is possible. If people come together and they want to make these sorts of changes, they should have the ability to make those changes.
New Zealand's politicians have repeatedly failed to tighten gun control. It's taken a tragedy to force them at last to act. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
Our reporter, Nita Blake-Person, was at the Botanic Gardens when news of the gun ban broke, and she asked people leaving floral tributes what they thought.
Yeah, I think it's good. I don't think there is really a need for it, for those sort of weapons, but I'm not a gun owner or anything like that. I've never actually fired a gun, so, I don't really know, but yeah, anything to take those sort of weapons out of, those sort of people that do that sort of thing, I think it's a good idea, yeah. If those weapons are available, yeah, they can get into the wrong hands, and that's when it becomes a real problem like this here.
I think it's a great move. I think she had no choice. I think it's probably a move we've made too late. I'm probably aware a lot of people have an emotional response to that happening. But I suppose what I say to those people is that, if they weren't affected as directly by what's happened here, I think they would probably all make a different decision. And I think, I think it's a move that she's made. I think it's been a great move she's made.
I grew up in the States, so I completely agree that we don't need those weapons here. They're weapons of war, and hunters are even saying they don't need it. So it's unnecessary for it to be here. And I'm really proud of those who are turning over their guns into the police, because look what happened. This didn't need to happen here.
Yep, I'd be quite happy with that. Yep, she can go ahead and do that, and I won't have any problems there for sure.
Why do you think it's a good idea?
I own a rifle for hunting purposes. You don't need that type of weapon to hunt, so I don't see any point in anyone but the military and maybe the police having that. I don't need it. You can get rid of those for sure.
I don't actually see any point in shooting an animal with millions of bullets. One bullet. And if you miss, good, keeps the animal alive. But if you hit it, well, then you deal with it. But you don't need lots of bullets to do it. And so there's no place in hunting, or what else you would use the gun for. Hunting, pest control, should be able to do it with just a shotgun.
Well, I think the military-style one should be done away with. I actually have a semi-automatic, which is a sporting rifle for shooting rabbits on the farm, and I think that's all you need, a low-calibre sporting rifle, not a military one. And so that's the best thing I've ever heard.
There is going to be an amnesty and a buyback, much like they had in Australia with the Port Arthur massacre, for guns to be handed in. Would you consider handing yours in?
Well, no, I still need mine because I'm overrun with rabbits. But yes, if I had a military one, and they're a lot higher calibre than what the 22 is as well. So, but no, I think it's a great thing to get rid of it.
Let's go now to Christchurch to our reporter Logan Church.
Thanks, Lisa. Yes, we're here in Latimer Square, just in front of the Transitional Cathedral, also known as the Cardboard Cathedral, where a memorial service is expected to get underway in the next hour or so. We don't know how many people are expected to come, but we've already seen some people come bearing ferns, some with flowers, so we're going to see who's going to come in the next hour or so for this memorial service. At least 15 of the 50 people killed in last Friday's terror attack have been laid to rest or are on their way to their final resting place. In Christchurch today, 7 funerals have taken place. They were for 14-year-old Syed Ahmed Milne, 24-year-old Tariq Rashid Omar, 64-year-old Linda Armstrong, 70-year-old Hussein Muhammad Khalil Mustafa, 30-year-old father of 2 Fahaj Hashan, 55-year-old Bithala Safi and 71-year-old Hajid Daoud Nabi, who greeted the gunman with the words, "Hello brother, welcome." It follows yesterday's burials of Khalid and Hamza Mustafa, Junaid Ismail, Ashraf Ali, Lilik Ahmed Ahmed, and another victim whose name has been suppressed. Saeed Adib Ahmed was also farewelled and has been flown to his home nation of Pakistan. The families have invited media to attend these funerals, but at a distance, and I went to 2 burials today. This morning, Syed Ahmed Milne and Tariq Rashid Omar were laid to rest at the Memorial Park Cemetery in Eastern Christchurch. Tariq was 24, Syed 14. Both were much-loved members of their communities, in particular Kashmir High School, where Syed was a current student, Tariq a former student. It was windy and cold today, weather that reflected the sombre atmosphere. Bailey Jordan, a student at Kashmir High School, was in attendance.
I didn't know Saeed, but I knew Tariq quite well. He's the brother of my best friend. He was really nice, friends with everyone. One of those kind of people, you know, like that everyone knew, always had a smile on his face, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Part of the Islamic burial process involves families and friends dropping dirt onto the body after they are lowered into the grave.
It was quite hard doing it, to be honest. Going up, putting the dirt on, with the tradition and everything, it was quite hard.
But you felt it was an important thing to do?
Yeah, it was very important, yeah.
Another attendee was Laura Hopper of Littleton. She says Syed will be sorely missed in the tight-knit community.
So we're here supporting Syed's family. He's part of the Littleton community, and that's where we're from. He was in my daughter's class at Littleton Primary, and just wanted to show our respects for everyone who's hurting in Christchurch. Beautiful, humble, just kind-hearted boy who loved soccer, never had a hard word to say about anyone. He's, one of the most beautiful kids I've ever met. I went on a school trip with him once, and he's just the sort of kid that fills your heart with happy thoughts and kind vibes, and that's what you want in times like these. It's just really, really sad. I'd say every second person I looked at here was from Littleton today, and that's family, friends, school teachers. Just the love goes on and on for him, and it won't stop.
Earlier this week, Kashmir High School principal Mark Wilson paid tribute to Syed.
He joined us as a Year 9 student here at the beginning of 2018. He's an awesome kid. I described him at the assembly to his fellow students. He had kind eyes, a big heart, a cheeky smile, and a thick mop of black hair. He loved playing football and also indoor futsal. He was an accomplished goalkeeper. Syed was a member of our school's futsal team that was going to be going to the national tournament in Wellington in the next week. He was studying hard, and he was looking forward to planning to be an engineer or an architect.
Muslims, Christians and people of all faiths stood together today at the funerals being held at the Memorial Park Cemetery. A mutual show of solidarity support, despair, but also hope. And that is something that those here today will cling to in the days to come. And in Auckland, my colleague Eric Spirite was at the funeral of Haji Musa Patel.
I'm here at the Al-Masjid Al-Mustafa Mosque in Otahuhu in South Auckland. There's a large group of women behind me just waiting outside the mosque. Inside, you might be able to hear there's a large group of men offering prayers and chants. It's going on and on all afternoon. There were prayers earlier, now there are speeches. The roads are full of cars. There's a constant stream of people coming here. There are traffic wardens guiding people. There's people actually offering the traffic wardens some drinks because it's a very hot day. We already know there are traffic woes as people try to get to the cemetery ahead of the procession, which will shortly leave from here. We arrived earlier in the day when prayers were just getting started. Mourners pour into the Al-Masjid Al-Mustafa in Otahuhu, many originally from Fiji with fond memories of Musa Patel.
He's got very kind heart and he was just among all the community in Fiji. He's just going to all the communities and serve them.
The last time I saw him was when he came and visited and stayed at our place when I had a baby. And he was very fun, very loving, very caring.
Tariq Mohammed was married by his close friend Musa Patel in Fiji before he moved to the United States. He flew in this morning from Sacramento.
Musa Patel was a very majestic man. He had the power of attracting people. His teachings really help us throughout life in order to be more successful in this world and the hereafter as well. This really helps us as well. And it's really hard for me not to start crying in front of you.
The president of this mosque, Haji Abdul Shakil, has hardly slept since last Friday. He has just returned from Christchurch, where he helped prepare Musa Patel's body to bring him back to Auckland.
I know the frustration with the families. The time has taken a little bit for the process, as the government has to make sure it was a criminal case, so they need to make sure that guy has been taken into task for everything he has done for the people.
Shakil says the crowds of mourners that have travelled here today lay testament to the character of Musa Patel. He was a celebrated imam originally from India, but based in Lautoka for 25 years before migrating to Australia just last month. He was visiting Christchurch with his wife when he fell victim, among so many others, to one man's senseless attack. His friends in Fiji say their last conversations with him were haunting, as he asked for forgiveness for anything wrong he had done or any debts that he owed, as if knowing he would never return. Shakil says he welcomes the whole community and invites people to learn from Musa Patel's life and learn more about Islam.
I know him personally from a number of years. That's what I'm saying. He's one of the guys we never forget, and he is with us. He's not gone away, so we will always be remembered.
The relatively young imam says he has been blown over by the outreach of the New Zealand police, who have been standing guard at all mosques around the country, saying he's never been treated and spoken to so kindly. I'm here at the back of the mosque where the body of Haji Musa Patel has been taken out of the mosque and into the funeral van. You'll notice it's not a normal casket, there's just the shrouded body that's been prepared on a platform. They will go in procession here, led by the New Zealand Police, to Manukau Memorial Gardens. As you can see, people are chanting. Lots of memories and wishes being expressed here. Lots of memories of Musa Patel being a man of peace and Islam being a religion of peace.
Christchurch has undoubtedly banded together in opposition to racism following last week's mosque attacks. But some are worried that this might not last. Philip Gandhi lost one of his best mates, Tala, in the shooting last week. I met him last night not far from the El Noor Mosque.
I'm here to pay my last respects to my friend Tala, and also to come and there's so many of my family members that have been affected. Some of them escaped without any bruises. There's others that have been shot in the leg, but mainly for Tala, who was a good mate of mine. I studied engineering with him, and sadly he lost his life on Friday.
What kind of a man was he?
He was a very, very religious person. I think the thing that stands out most is halfway through an exam, the man left the exam to go and pray, and he came back. And he used to pray 5 times a day. He'd always leave class, go pray, come back. And his family, similar to most, he had to pay international fees as a student, and he was studying civil engineering. Over 3 years, that's in the order of $70,000 to $80,000. And when you get so much money, you don't know how their parents struggled, what ends they had to meet to make that happen. His father was an accountant. He sadly passed away as well. And to see that none of that come to fruition, and he won't be able to live his dream, really puts an impact off you. But having said that, he looked the same as me. He had a beard. He was brown-skinned. After seeing that, at the end of the day, I was legit. I was growing up in New Zealand. I went to school here. I went through high school here. Racism exists. But you'd never think that my hand's shaking. You'd never think something like as extreme as this could ever happen in my city. But having said that, coming back from it, to see the awesome support that from the gangs who make you feel safe to a certain extent, to all my mates, and the awesome support on social media, on the streets, even the tone of the people, how they talk to you has changed. And having seen that puts faith back in that there's good in all people. And in this time of tragedy, I know a lot of people are down, and it was my friend that I lost, but there's so many people. There's a person I know, it was his birthday, and he lost his father on that day. Thinking about, I guess, he's lost the person, but as Muslims believe, it's the best way that a person could have died. So it gives them hope, and it's sabr. We need to have patience.
Can you explain that to me, if that's all right?
Sabr.
Yeah.
So during prayer, you've done uzu, and you're in the cleanest state you can be, and you're saying prayers, you're saying La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and for Muslims, that's like the best way a person can die, and they'll be shaheed. They'll have a direct route to, I don't know much about it, but it's one of the best ways you can leave this world, sadly. But a lot of families, I guess, when they think of that, it's really, that's one of the positive things, that the person is going to heaven. And that's one of the, it gives some peace to the family, knowing that it happened in such a moment.
You spoke before about how you had experienced racism growing up here. Do you think, out of all this tragedy that's happened over the last week, that things might change here in Christchurch? Do you have hope that that might change? Yeah, racism, it starts with high school kids, and it's really sad. And till this day, I haven't had the confidence to talk about it as openly as I can, but even those friends of mine who may have been, I call them friends, but you normalize it to a certain degree when you're a high school student, because it's just all around you. And then I found a safe haven when I found my Pacifica friends and whatnot. And then you find a safe haven. But I think this tragedy has brought the positiveness out. How long is it going to last? That's my key question. There's no doubt that it's touched the people's hearts. It's brought the best out of people. But I asked all of you that keep it going. Let's not lose this awesome unity that we've had over the past couple of days. I know it's going to last at least a year and a half. But after that, let's keep this going. No matter what your skin color, we all bleed red when we cut our skin. And growing up, my granddad was Solomon Islands, my grandma was Chinese, I've got also Indian in me, and I've got Muslim, Christianity, Catholic. My mum was Catholic, my dad was Hindu, and then my grandparents, they were Muslim and Catholic. So I grew up with all these religions, and that's why I've learned about all these religions growing up as a person. And for me, my dad told me, people, we are one people. Never, and there's not many people that sort of get that experience that I've had. So I learned to respect all religions and to remember that we are one people at the end of the day. And for me personally, I think what the person is taught at the start of their life, that's the religion they follow. But no matter, in Fiji, everyone has a religion. When I came to New Zealand, being an atheist was completely, it was unknown to me. I thought that person was crazy, but seeing it now, we're all one at the end of the day. Let's remember that, and let's stand united, Kym Shelley of Christchurch is the organiser of tonight's memorial service, and he joins us now live from Latimer Square. Thanks for joining us, Kym.
Oh, you're very welcome.
So what's happening here tonight?
Well, the church is, of course, deeply moved by all that happened last week, and coming on the back of all that we've been walked through as a city over these last years, we really wanted to be together, and we tried to make it happen over the weekend on Sunday afternoon, to be here halfway in between the two sites where such tragedy happened, but it wasn't possible over the weekend. So whilst the rest of the country were able to gather and to be community together, we weren't able to. So this is the first occasion of, I hope, many occasions over this next few days and weeks when the community will be able to gather together and share in this moment together.
Was that due to security concerns why you couldn't meet?
It was exactly that. It was security concerns on Saturday and Sunday, yes.
Yeah, did your church hold services on?
All the churches, the 300 churches from around Christchurch, all gathered in their normal places on Sunday morning, and they wept together and they shared together and prayed together. But this is this is us all coming together for the community, with the community, which is very special.
What do you hope the outcome of tonight's service would be? I mean, there's been lots of services and vigils all over the city over the last week. What do you hope the outcome of all of this is?
Well, this is our opportunity locally to be together, and we hope that in this context we will find love and support and hope. We all pray. I pray. My daughter was very ill when she was little, and I prayed not because I'm a pastor or because I'm a Christian, but because I'm a human being. And we find in moments of great trauma this tendency to want to pray. And so this is that context. This is a place when we can come and share, be together. We've invited the Muslim community to come with us and be here with us this evening, and that's wonderful. We would love that if that's possible.
Of course, Christchurch's community has faced unimaginable tragedy over the last week. What would your message be to members of our community who are perhaps immigrants, who are perhaps scared right now? What would your message be?
My message is that we are human beings, and human beings are more flawed than we ever dare imagine. But there is more love, and we are more loved than we could ever dare hope. And we would want to say to anybody who is a stranger, who is new, who feels an outcast, that they are welcome in this place. And God has welcomed us, and we welcome them.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kym. That's Kym Shelley, the organiser of tonight's memorial service here at Latimer Square, which will get underway in the next half hour or so. Members of Auckland's Muslim community had travelled to Christchurch to thank those who were first on the scenes following last Friday's attacks. My colleague Nita Blake-Pearson and cameraman Stan Ferrier went along.
A basket of gifts from one community to another, a gesture of thanks and solidarity.
You are the unsung heroes, and it becomes our responsibility and duty to pay. And thank you for your services. So, from the bottom of my heart, on behalf of my community, thank you very much.
Members from Auckland's Muslim community travelling to Christchurch to pay their respects.
I'm actually born in Christchurch, but I live in Auckland at the moment, so it was almost a good homecoming as well, in a sense, to say, hey, time to go and be with the people.
They're carrying a clear message of love and peace, wearing hats and T-shirts with the slogan, "Love for all, hatred for none," and wanted to pay their respects to those who were there in the harrowing minutes after the mosque attacks.
They're called the Unkept Heroes, and it's important for us to recognise them during this time as well. I think we're very fortunate in a country like New Zealand, where this tragedy happened and nobody wants it and nobody's prepared for it. But when you really look at the days that followed on the day and the days that followed, it happens. They manage themselves so professionally, our police, our ambulances, and in doing so, including our medical team, in doing so, they have actually saved so many more lives.
Bashir Khan recalls a similar tragedy hitting mosques in his community back in Pakistan, but the response there was quite different.
The terrorists attacked and killed over 100 people, but they never received this support. They never received this compassion from the public and the outpouring of love and unity. They had to fend for themselves, and the perpetrators today are still at large. Nothing happened, and the community had to gather together to help themselves and make a move on with their lives. We have two of those members in New Zealand, and it was interesting how they compared what happened to them and how New Zealand got together and basically stood as one and basically had a very simple message. that hatred does not belong in this country.
Paramedics recalled seeing rivers of blood at the mosque shootings. Canterbury Operations Manager Wally Mitchell, just 3 weeks into his job, says it's been a challenge.
After a dramatic day on Friday of working through recovery, we've got a big team of support around supporting our crews from that.
And it was an emotional time having their work recognised.
Extremely moved. It's heartening. I can't even begin to find the words that describes just how the sense that comes with connection and the coming together of the communities around this tragedy.
Bashir Khan says the paramedics he met with today were humbled and didn't want the praise, but they insisted.
It's what we would like to do. It's a very small token of our appreciation.
A gesture he says helped fill his heart during a time of such heartache. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, we'll go back to Christchurch. Our Foreign Minister, Winston Peters, is on his way to Turkey to clear up inflammatory comments made by the President Erdogan after the Christchurch attacks. It's Race Relations Day today, but there's no Race Relations Commissioner. Why? And more on the gun crackdown. As always, we would love to hear from you, so do text in 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But now here's Susanna with the headlines.
All military-style semi-automatic and assault rifles have been banned in New Zealand. High-capacity magazines and parts that can be converted into military-style arms are also outlawed. The bans were announced by Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern this afternoon and cover every weapon used in last Friday's mosque attack in Christchurch. And the Police Commissioner is urging people to voluntarily give up their firearms or face prosecution. Mike Bush says those with military-style semi-automatic weapons and assault rifles must contact police either online or over the phone to arrange a buyback. He's also said today New Zealand remains in a high threat level after the Christchurch attacks. The police are investigating allegations of serious breaches in their vetting of the accused Christchurch killer for his firearms licence. A former head of firearms control for the police claims they did not follow the required procedure to ensure only fit and proper persons are able to buy guns. He says the police failed to interview a close relative or partner of the accused man and that they only talked to 2 associates who knew him from an online chat room. Air New Zealand is reviewing its rules around body art and says it recognises the need to allow staff to express their identity. This comes after they turned down a man from a job because his tāmoko didn't comply with the standards for the airline's uniform. A Māori academic has slammed the job refusal as outrageous, pointing out the airline uses the koru on every aircraft. New details have emerged about last October's Lion air crash in Indonesia, in which all 189 people aboard were killed. According to the plane's cockpit voice recorder, the pilots scrambled to find out why the Boeing 737 MAX 8 was lurching downwards in the final minutes of the doomed flight. Sources say they scrambled through a handbook to understand what was going on and what to do about it. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Let's turn to business now. Nona Peltier is in the studio. Nona, economic growth, well, it's picking up, but it's still weaker than the Reserve Bank was hoping for. So what are the numbers looking like?
Interesting. The market was expecting a much softer number than it ended up with. So the GDP numbers that we got today for the fourth quarter, that's the 3 months ending December, certainly surprised on the upside. Still weren't as strong as the Reserve Bank was expecting, which means that interest rates are unlikely to be moved by this. Yeah. But we are talking about these numbers are an increase in the quarter of 0.6%. Now that compares with a 0.3% expectation at the low end of the range that the market was expecting. The Reserve Bank was looking more at 0.8. That's what they're planning on for their monetary policy. So 0.6 is stronger than the market, less than what the Reserve Bank was expecting. Nevertheless, though, that certainly moved our dollar on a day when the U.S. dollar was in some trouble, and that was partly because the U.S. Federal Reserve said they're not going to raise rates anymore this year. And some of the people in the market are concerned that maybe this means that they'll actually lower rates again. And it's the speed at which the U.S. Federal Reserve has changed its mind on interest rates that's unsettled the market. That saw the Dow fall a little bit. and also the S&P with the NASDAQ somewhat flat. Now, interestingly, normally when a U.S. Federal Reserve or a central bank says we're not going to raise interest rates, that usually helps the market, but not this time. Asia is looking a little bit hotter than the U.S. market, and certainly our market finished it finished up in the black, which was pretty good on a day when really there was a lot of volatility. Our NZX Top 50 Index rose 12 points, which is pretty good when you think how much the U.S. markets suffered as a result. And our Kiwi rose to a 7-week high at 69.1 US cents. So against the Australian, we were at 96.7 and 52.3 pence against the pound. Interestingly,
How many against pence was it? Sorry,
52.3 pence, yeah. Now, interestingly, the people who look at money markets have raised the top end of where the New Zealand dollar might go. And so we could see some more upside from here and a lot less downside. And that's, again, because of what's happened with the U.S. Federal Reserve. Mostly everything that happens in our currency market is often affected by the big dollar. The U.S. dollar is the one that really sways things. So, yeah, interesting day on the markets.
In other news, so Refining New Zealand is looking to generate hydrogen from solar power. And what is the plan here?
Yeah, now, interesting. I didn't know this, but the Refining New Zealand, which is the Marsden Point oil refinery producer, is also the biggest producer of pure hydrogen in New Zealand, and I had no idea. But anyway, they are part of this plan that the government launched in Taranaki last week, talking about creating hydrogen as a fuel for vehicles, say diesel and whatnot. They can't use electricity to power a diesel vehicle. You have to have some other kind of alternative renewable fuel. Hydrogen is the one that is moving ahead globally. And New Zealand, Refining New Zealand are in on the game. They're saying, yep, we've got hydrogen, we can get in on this. And it's good because we can offer our staff a career path into the future, and it's in line with what the government's hoping to do with carbon neutral by 2050. So yeah, they're going to be exploring that. Quite interesting. And they said they're not a sunset industry, they're one in transition. So there you go.
Looking on the bright side of life. So you gave us the dollar.
I gave you the dollar. Yeah. Now the index rose 12 points to 9,448. We're still off we came down a little bit yesterday, but otherwise, the markets are looking pretty good considering a lot of volatility out there, especially with Brexit and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll have more on Brexit a little later. Thanks, Nona. That is your business wrap. They were unfortunately taken out of context. That's the explanation being given by a spokesperson for the Turkish president over his leader's controversial and inflammatory comments after the Christchurch attacks. Recep Tayyip Erdogan criticised the Anzacs for their role in Gallipoli and threatened to send New Zealanders and Australians who came to Turkey with anti-Islam sentiment back in caskets. Our Foreign Minister, Winston Peters, is on his way to Turkey, where he's promised to address the remarks, which have sparked a diplomatic row and raised security concerns ahead of Gallipoli commemorations. The ABC's Eric Torchek is in Istanbul and he sent this report.
Chanting war, struggle and martyrdom, students at a state university in regional Turkey protest against Islamophobia in the West.
When you compare it with the reaction when there's an attack against other religions, we can clearly see the West's hypocrisy. These events show us that when they're talking about democracy, human rights and freedom of belief, they still bear a grudge against Islam.
Broadcast on state television news, the protest was an example of some of the sentiment in Turkey after the country's president showed footage of the Christchurch attacks at his election rallies and spoke at Gallipoli about the way Turkey had repelled Australian and New Zealand invaders. Political analyst Aslo Aydin Tashbash, a fellow with the European Council on Foreign Relations, says the president is using the shootings to rally support for upcoming municipal elections.
His governing party is in trouble in major cities, particularly Ankara, and I think that he's grabbed this opportunity to evoke perhaps an emotional response, rile up religious sentiments, to positioning himself as the leader of the Muslim world.
Mr. Erdogan's spokesman has put out a statement saying the president's remarks at Gallipoli were taken out of context. While the president had warned that anyone who came with anti-Muslim sentiments would also be sent home in a casket, his spokesman said Turkey has always been a welcoming and gracious host to Anzac visitors. It's not the first time the president has stirred international outrage for domestic electoral reasons. Aslo Aydin Tashbash says Mr Erdogan provoked a diplomatic row with Germany before a major referendum on changing Turkey's form of government.
The tension, escalation, the idea that Turkey is fighting a war, fighting it alone, all on its own, against the enemies, against crusaders, and all of that was against the West, was used to boost and consolidate otherwise uninterested or indifferent AKP voters.
In addition to his election rallies, the president wrote an opinion piece for the Washington Post newspaper likening the New Zealand shootings to terrorist attacks committed or inspired by Islamist groups.
In this regard, we must establish that there is absolutely no difference between the murderer who killed innocent people in New Zealand and those who have carried out terrorist acts in Turkey, France, Indonesia and elsewhere.
New Zealand's Foreign Minister Winston Peters is coming to Turkey with the task of setting the record straight on behalf of his country. He'll meet Muslim leaders from around the world in Istanbul tomorrow at an emergency summit of the Organisation for Islamic Cooperation called to discuss the New Zealand attacks. Prior to President Erdogan's comments, Turkish officials said they were not expecting a greater level of threat to Australians and New Zealanders attending Anzac Day commemorations at Gallipoli.
And that was Eric Torchik reporting from Istanbul. Backed into a corner and laying her job on the line, the British Prime Minister Theresa May has formally asked the European Union for a 3-month delay to the Brexit deadline. The EU looks set to approve the request, but only if Parliament passes her controversial Brexit deal next week. Mrs May laid the blame for the ongoing chaos and confusion squarely at the feet of her own squabbling MPs. The ABC's Samantha Hawley has more from Westminster.
You, the public, have had enough.
Theresa May, boxed into a corner and presiding over the deepest political chaos since wartime, emerged for a late-night press conference to reassure the British people and defy her critics.
You're tired of the infighting. You're tired of the political games and the arcane procedural rows.
Earlier, she addressed the House of Commons about the delay she never wanted. They'd gathered to hear the Prime Minister explain the chaos and disorder just 9 days out from the Brexit deadline.
The Prime Minister.
Respect for democracy means that this House should deliver the Brexit that the British people voted for.
She's written to the EU seeking a 3-month Brexit delay. Under increasing pressure and leading an ever-divided cabinet, she backed away from seeking a longer time frame, saying that would mean fielding candidates for the European Parliament elections in May.
As Prime Minister, I am not prepared to delay Brexit any further than the 30th of June.
That deadline can also be seen as a timeline for Mrs May falling on her sword. And with the pressure mounting, she entered a blame game, hitting out at the more than 600 MPs who make up the House of Commons.
This House, carrying on contemplating its navel on Europe and failing to address the issues that matter to our constituents, their schools...
Order.
Respect for democracy means that this House should deliver the Brexit that the British people voted for. This House has indulged itself on Europe for too long.
The opposition leader says the Prime Minister must pass over control of the process.
This government has led the country and themselves into crisis, chaos and division. We are still legally due to leave the European Union in 9 days' time. Months of running down the clock and a concerted campaign of blackmail, bullying and bribery has failed to convince the House.
Theresa May says she'll bring her deal, defeated by large margins twice before, back to the House of Commons next week.
We have reacted with patience and goodwill to numerous turns of events.
And adding to the political chaos, the EU Council President Donald Tusk says a delay is likely to be granted, but only if the deal passes.
Although Brexit fatigue is increasingly visible and justified, we cannot give up seeking until the very last moment a positive solution.
EU leaders will gather for a summit in Brussels on Thursday. Right now, though, nothing can be guaranteed.
Samantha Hawley reporting there. It is about 11 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We'd love to hear from you. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Air New Zealand has been called disgraceful and discriminatory after turning away a man from a job because of his tā moko. Sydney Heremaya says the airline minimised his lineage by comparing his tā moko to body art, and others have joined him in calling for the airline to change its outdated policy. Our Ethnic Affairs reporter Jessie Chang has the story.
Whakapapa, identity. That's what Sydney Heremaya's tā moko means to him.
My grandfather passed away 15 years ago and handed me my tā moko. And just before he passed away, he handed it to me. He said, if you choose to get a tā moko, this would be the preferred kind of design that would be in line with our whakapapa.
Mr. Heremaya says since then he's always worn it proudly. That's why he was so taken aback when he was told by Air New Zealand he wasn't going to be considered for a job because of his tā moko. The whangarei man had applied for a casual position in the airline's customer service team last month. He told them about his tā moko and Samoan tatau on his shoulder and arm. But 2 days ago, the airline sent him an email saying he wouldn't be considered for the role because his body art didn't comply with the standards for its uniform, which features a koru.
I just felt there was a degree of a lack of integrity from Air New Zealand's side, where they're kind of saying your culture is okay for us to have on our planes and on our uniforms, but only when they're designed specifically for the plane.
Mr. Heremaya says he's speaking up about what happened to him because this isn't just about tā moko, it's about the rights of other people with cultures that look visibly different. He says everyone should feel their cultural identity is fully embraced in their workplace. The Human Rights Commission says a person of Māori descent may not be denied employment, entry to premises or decline service because they wear moko visibly. A senior lecturer of Māori development at the Auckland University of Technology, Ella Henry, says Air New Zealand's response is outrageous.
Air New Zealand's brand, its internationally recognised brand, the name of its lounges is a Māori word and it's a Māori symbol. So to deny a Māori who also has his Māori identity on his body, to deny him a job whilst they utilise Māori cultural property is disgraceful in the 21st century.
Jordan Clark has been a tā moko artist for the past decade. He currently works at Otautahi Tattoo in Auckland and says he's known people who have been discriminated against and turned away from venues because of their tā moko.
If this was like the 1800s, it'll be a bit different, but this day and age, it's kind of like it needs to be more socially accepted. Yeah, people should have the freedom to express themselves however they want, whether it be religion, cultural.
Air New Zealand says it can't comment specifically on an individual's case because of privacy requirements, but it says many of its international customers, especially some Asian countries, find body art offensive or associate it with criminal behaviour. The airline says it's been reviewing its guidelines for body art since late last year and will be making what it calls a positive announcement by the end of April. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jessie Chang tēnei.
We have some breaking news to hand. There has been some confusion over the number of people killed in the Christchurch mosque shootings, and Radio New Zealand started querying this afternoon. We have now got a statement from the police. It says an error was made in the charging document prepared for the first court appearance of the man charged with murder in relation to the Christchurch terror attacks. The error saw an incorrect victim name included in the charging document. We have spoken with the person incorrectly named named on the charging document and apologised. The charge sheet will be amended. The New Zealand Police regret this error and apologises for any harm caused by the mistake. So this is a person who was named. It was a murder charge. Now let's bring in Veronica Schmidt, who is our investigations editor and was the person who started first making calls on this. What made you start querying?
Well, look, we've, like other media, been putting together a memorial list of the victims who died in the attacks because, you know, we wanted to honour these people and remember their names and write something about each of them, which we've been doing over several days. And we got to a point where we had 51 names. And we went back and forth, and we've spent the afternoon looking through the police's list of names and through the Federation of Islamic Associations of New Zealand's list of names, and we still had 51. So we phoned the police several times this afternoon and asked if the death toll had gone up to 51. They didn't answer us, and we have made several more calls, and now this, that they had... They had incorrectly named a victim who was alive as dead.
Because it was a murder charge?
That's right. Mm.
And do we know anything about this person?
No, this person's name has been suppressed, so we can't tell you the name, we can't talk about the name, and I can't say anything about the person at this stage.
But what we do know is that 50 people are dead, the death toll remains the same. However, the person named in the murder charge, which the accused is currently being held on, is still alive.
That's right, and I can't tell you yet, as this has just happened, what this means for the charge. I understand they will be changing the name on that charging document. I don't know what the flow-on effect of that will be.
Because he's currently obviously in custody. Hey, thank you for joining us. That's Veronica Schmidt, who's our investigations editor. And if you're just joining us, just to recap, the police have said that they have made an error in charging the accused in the Christchurch mosque killings with the murder of an individual who is in fact not deceased. This person was incorrectly named on the charging document and they are alive. The police are saying that the charge sheet will be amended and that the death toll from the shooting remains at 50. Not 51, and that is in response to Radio New Zealand's queries after counting 51 names that had been released. Religious groups, charities and politicians in Fiji are calling for peace and tolerance amid a rise in online hate speech after the Christchurch terrorist attacks. The police chief says a worrying amount of hate speech and rhetoric is being spread and it can't be allowed to continue. Sally Round reports.
Since the attack on 2 mosques last Friday, there have been strong expressions in Fiji of sympathy and solidarity for the people of New Zealand, Christchurch and the Muslim community. But the chair of a coalition promoting human rights in Fiji, Nalini Singh, says they've also seen a subtle targeting of Fiji's Muslims.
At the same time, we are also seeing comments that are espousing to racism and xenophobia and Islamophobia rearing its ugly head, in some of our social media platforms in our communities as well.
Nalini Singh says prejudice towards a sector of the community is worrying, and the onus is on leaders to ensure statements of solidarity turn into action.
We are strongly calling on everyone to behave responsibly. There's a responsibility on all of us to call out and shut down any forms of racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia that we see and that we witness.
Earlier this week, the Police Commissioner, Brigadier General Sitiveni Ngiliho, ordered an investigation into the hate speech circulating on social media following the massacre. He said the police will be taking people to task if found propagating hatred online. Worries over online hate speech were echoed in Samoa this week when the Prime Minister Tuilaepa Saileli Malielegaoi told Parliament the attacks were a wake-up call for Samoan leaders. Offering condolences over the attacks, he warned IT advancements in the country meant Samoa was also seeing attempts to create hatred amongst communities copied from overseas and under the guise of free speech. Jope Tarai of the University of the South Pacific says the online environment is a new landscape for people in the Pacific and more education initiatives are needed.
There are some concerns
But in terms of, in light of what has happened in Christchurch, there needs to be a greater approach to education. There's very little approaches to education that we're currently seeing.
Meanwhile, a Hindu leader in Fiji, Sanju Prasad, says while his community condemns the attacks, there is a silver lining.
It has brought the communities together and the religions together, the races together. In fact, it has served to consolidate our relationship with each other and our feelings towards each other, more commitment towards love and harmony.
Sanju Prasad says Hindus want to share the grief of their Muslim brothers and sisters, so the Holi celebrations, or Festival of Colours, usually marked with much merrymaking, will be toned down. Public displays in Fiji have been cancelled, and Hindus are being urged instead to pray for the victims within their communities. Ko Sally Round, Tēnei.
If you're just joining us, we'll bring you up to date with events around the Christchurch mosque shootings. The police have released a statement saying that they have made an error in the charging document. This is in relation to the murder accused in those terror attacks. He has been charged with the murder of a single person who it turns out is not dead.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leia Tawa tēnei. The police investigating the Christchurch terror attacks have admitted making a key mistake by charging Breton Tarrant with the murder of a woman who is still alive. A spokesperson says an error was made in the document laid in court during the accused gunman's first appearance. The police say they've apologised to the person incorrectly named for any harm caused, and the document will be amended. The Prime Minister has unveiled sweeping gun control changes, including a ban on all military-style semi-automatic weapons and assault rifles. The ban, which also covers high-capacity magazines, is to be rushed into law within 3 weeks. Here's our political reporter, Craig McCulloch.
6 days after the Christchurch terror attack, an order has been given to essentially prohibit the affected firearms, including the types used by the killer, with immediate effect to prevent stockpiling. The government will set up a buyback scheme which officials estimate will cost between $100 and $200 million. An amnesty will also apply for the return of banned guns. The changes have the support of all 3 government parties and the National Party. From Parliament, Craig McCulloch.
All the families of those killed last Friday are now able to take their loved ones home. The Police Commissioner, Mike Bush, says that the identification of all 50 is complete and next of kin have been advised. He says the bodies are now being returned to their families.
Some obviously have been returned, but families, next of kin, are now able to uplift their loved ones. So once that identification process is complete, all of the next of kin have been advised.
Mike Bush says more than 120 police officers, forensic experts, coroners and pathologists worked on getting the victims identified as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, 28 people injured in the mosque shootings are still in Christchurch Hospital. The District Health Board says 6 of them are in a critical condition in intensive care. 1 person has been discharged from hospital with community support and 2 others have improved enough to be moved from intensive care to other wards. A 4-year-old girl is still critically ill in Starship Hospital in Auckland. Her father is stable in nearby Auckland City Hospital. The DHB says it needs to postpone some non-urgent surgeries for the rest of the week to free up theatre space and teams in order to keep caring for the mosque injured. Muslim students at a private Auckland girls' school have been told they cannot wear a hijab because it violates the school's dress code. A diocesan school for girls teacher who wishes to remain anonymous says 2 Muslim students were told visible religious items were against school policy. He says staff were stunned when the principal, Heather McRae, announced that it had always been policy. Ms McRae has declined an interview. However, in a statement through the school's PR company, she says students can wear a hijab in support of tomorrow's Scarves and Solidarity event. Air New Zealand says it recognises the need to allow staff to express their identity and it's reviewing its rules relating to body art. Last month, a whangarei man, Sydney Heremeyer, applied for a casual position in the airline's customer service team. He says he disclosed his tāmoko and Samoan tatau on his shoulder and arm. 2 days ago, the airline advised him he wouldn't be considered for the job because his body art didn't comply with staff uniform standards. Air New Zealand says many of its international customers, especially those from some Asian countries, find body art offensive or associate it with criminal behaviour. But it says it has been reviewing the rules since late last year and will make what it calls a positive announcement by the end of next month. The British Prime Minister has further angered her own MPs by berating them for their indecision over Brexit. Theresa May has been forced to request an extension from the European Union after her Brexit deal twice failed to gain the support of MPs in Parliament. Here's the ABC's Samantha Hawley at Westminster.
Amid deepening political uncertainty, Theresa May has formally asked the EU to delay Brexit until June the 30th. The EU Council President, Donald Tusk, says the 27 leaders may grant an extension, but only if the British leader can get the Brexit deal through the House of Commons next week. Mrs May addressed the nation during a late-night press conference.
This delay is a matter of great personal regret for me.
For now, the UK is still legally bound to leave the EU at 11 p.m. on March the 29th.
Samantha Hawley reporting. 5 new cases of measles in Canterbury have brought the total number confirmed in the region's outbreak to 34. The Medical Officer of Health, Raman Pink, says 22 of those who've contracted the disease are under the age of 28. The Wellington City Council is still preparing to launch an e-scooter trial, despite having to rework its initial contract with the scooter providers. Councillors voted last month to ban e-scooters from footpaths, but were subsequently advised they don't have the power to do this. Today they voted to change the wording so that riders will be allowed on the footpath if the road is too unsafe. The Deputy Mayor Jill Day says pedestrians needn't worry.
Scooter riders are actually also pedestrians. They do actually understand what it's like to be a pedestrian, and I think sometimes we forget. We sort of picture it as that's all they do. People that ride bikes also drive cars. They also walk on the footpaths as well. So we also have to understand that majority of people actually do get it and they are careful.
Wellington's Deputy Mayor Jill Day. It's 6:05. The Crusaders will evoke the spirit of their extraordinary 2011 Super Rugby campaign when they return to the field against the Waratahs on Saturday. Captain Sam Whitelock says his team is still coming to terms with last Friday's terror attack in Christchurch. Their scheduled match against the Highlanders the following day was abandoned after distraught players were consulted. And Whitelock says their preparation for the match in Sydney has a surreal feel to it. He compares it to their reaction in the immediate aftermath of another tragedy, the devastating earthquake of February 2011 that killed 185 people in Christchurch. World and Commonwealth Games shot put champion Tom Walsh is out to replicate his efforts of last year when he headlines tonight's International Athletics meeting in Auckland. Last year he threw a New Zealand record of 22.67 metres, the 9th equal world all-time best. At the recent New Zealand Championships he threw 21.70 to win his 10th national title. The achievements of the country's leading cricketers will be recognised at the annual awards in Auckland tonight. The Black Caps are expected to dominate the awards, given that the Test side has risen to second in the world rankings and 3 of them were recently named in the ICC's World Test Team of the Year. That's the news.
Kakapo Files, the podcast, is following a very busy kakapo breeding season.
Last night I was at Punamu's nest. She's mated with Gulliver, which is very exciting. He's a Fiordland bird.
Setting up tents and finding nests, and a few late nights monitoring nests from the train station back at base.
The ding-dong at Bella's Nest went off a couple of minutes ago.
The Kakapo Files. Find it on the podcast page at rnz.co.nz.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland, fine spells and isolated showers. Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, fine apart from isolated showers tomorrow. Waikato to Taranaki, including Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Taumaranui and Taiape. Mainly fine, isolated showers in the afternoons and evenings. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy periods and the odd shower, becoming fine about the coast tomorrow afternoon. Whanganui to Wellington and Wairarapa, mainly fine, but cloudy periods and the odd shower about Wairarapa today. For all of the South Island, except Fiordland, fine, apart from areas of cloud or fog, especially morning and night. For Fiordland, a few showers in the west, cloudy periods elsewhere. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It's 6:08. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna. And in breaking news, a nationwide reflection for those killed in the Christchurch terror attacks will be held tomorrow. The Muslim call to prayer will be at 1:30, followed by 2 minutes silence at 1:32 at Hagley Park, opposite the Al Noor Mosque in Deans Avenue, Christchurch. And this will be broadcast on Radio New Zealand, so you can tune in. Now, less than a week after New Zealand's deadliest terror attack, the government has effectively banned all sales of military-style semi-automatic weapons and all assault rifles, effective immediately. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, unveiled the plans this afternoon, saying the time for mass and easy availability for these weapons must end. She was flanked by Police Minister Stuart Nash, who joins us now from our Parliament office. Good evening, Minister. Before I get to the gun changes, I just need to ask you about some breaking news. The police have confirmed that the person that they have charged, the gunman, the alleged gunman, with murdering is in fact alive. How did that happen?
Look, my understanding is it was an administrative error. It will have no impact whatsoever on the court process. I understand it's been rectified. And onwards and upwards, and let's bring this guy to justice who killed 50 Kiwis. So when you say it's been rectified, how? What's had to happen? Well, my understanding is they've got the right name on the one charge. Keep in mind the terrorist has been charged with one account of murder. Obviously, there are a lot more charges to come. And like I said, it has been rectified. So did he have to appear in court for that, or will there be another court appearance before the scheduled one in April? Not too sure on that, sorry. When did the police tell you that they'd made this mistake? About 10 minutes ago. That's your first you've heard of it? First I'd heard of it, yes. And how did it come to their attention that they had made this error? Again, sorry, you're probably best to talk to Commissioner Bush on that. But all I do know is it will make absolutely no difference to the charges this terrorist faces. So was there a period of time where you had an individual in jail for a crime or an alleged crime that didn't take place? Well, it appears that on the charge sheet the wrong name was there. That has been corrected. This terrorist will be held to account for the 50 people he murdered and also the 50 people he tried to murder. So I want New Zealanders to be assured that this terrorist will be held to account. Will you be talking to them about that? Because it seems to be a fundamental error, doesn't it, on a very, very important investigation. Yeah, well, I'm not too sure how it happened. I will have a conversation with the Commissioner at some point in time. But like I say, this terrorist will be held to account for the people he murdered. So people just have to be assured that this has been sorted and nothing will change in terms of the eventual charges this terrorist will face. OK, so in terms of the gun law changes, what can't I buy right now that I could have bought last Friday? What we're doing is we're banning all military-style semi-automatic weapons and all assault rifles. That will be passed through legislation. The Prime Minister has said by the end of the next sitting period, which is the last day is the 11th of April. What we've done is we have moved a whole lot of military-style semi-automatic and assault rifles from your stock standard A category into E category. So in essence, any of these military-style semi-automatics or assault rifles will be banned. So that's a stopgap until you change the legislation. Could I still buy magazines, multi-firing magazines, with 30 rounds in them? Can I still buy those as of today, this afternoon? Well, you can as of today, but don't waste your money because they will be illegal in 3 weeks' time. So what encouragement are you going to offer people to hand these back? Well, we do recognise that we are criminalising, well, potentially those who weren't before this order came into place. So there is a buyback scheme. The details we're just working through at this point in time, but there will be a fair and reasonable price paid for weapons. So how much do you think that's going to cost and what budget will it come out of? Well, I'm not too sure what budget it'll come out of, but we've been given an estimate by Treasury of between $100 and $200 million. Now, I know that's a very wide figure, but this is part of the problem we're facing. We just have absolutely no idea how many of these weapons are out there because of a potential loop in the legislation. Doesn't that, though, create an additional problem for you in a buyback or an amnesty? Because you'll actually have no idea what percentage of the weapons have been returned. No, but we will know how many weapons have been returned, of course. And the bottom line is people who hold on to these weapons once they have been banned will be committing a criminal offence. And
From what I know of the vast majority of gun owners, they will not want to be in this situation. So we are banning these weapons. There are two ways that gun owners can deal with this. They can go online to the police's website, police.gov.nz. There is a form on that which they can fill in.
But they're not your problem, are they, Minister? And I'm sorry to interrupt, but the sort of law-abiding citizen is not your problem. It's the other people who are your problem, and you have no idea how many of these weapons are out there. So this could have really limited effect.
Well, it is. Law-abiding citizens are not our problem, but we want to work very closely with them, because what we have done is we have banned weapons which were previously legal. And the vast majority of Kiwis will not want to be in a position where they're criminalised. So we think the measures we are putting in place around these banned weapons will compensate adequately in a fair and reasonable way for the handback. So there is an amnesty, so people can go online, fill this form in. Police will be in touch to determine whether they bring the weapons into the station or the police pick them up. And like I said, there will be a buyback scheme put into place.
Minister, just before you go, you'll be aware that a former senior police officer, Joe Green, has commented on the vetting process for the man accused of these killings. He maintains that there were no interview done with this man's next of kin as part of the licensing process, and that the two referees that he offered up were people who had never met him, were friends from an online chat room. Have you had a conversation with the police about that?
Well, I'm not going to comment on an ongoing investigation, but what I will say is the first tranche we're putting in place is banning these weapons, getting them out of the market. The second tranche will be looking at issues around licensing and a lot of other things in the Arms Act, and Cabinet will receive a paper on that on Monday. OK, quick yes or no answer, please. Do you have confidence in the process of vetting this man's licence? Look, I'm sorry, I'm not going to comment on an ongoing investigation. All right, thanks for joining us this evening. That is the Police Minister, Stuart Nash. Now, the Prime Minister signalled the crackdown less than 24 hours after the Christchurch terror attacks. So how are the details of the announcement being received? Our reporter, Andrew McRae, went to find out.
The Police Association says it's decisive action and required great courage from the government. President Chris Cahill says it's a good mix of reforms that balance the practical needs of firearm owners.
In a way, it's the minimum we would expect, but it's a really good start. There's clearly a second chance of things to be considered, but these are the weapons that we were most concerned about and that represent the most danger to New Zealand, so we're very supportive.
He says without doubt it will make New Zealand a safer place.
Going to be no addition to these weapons out there, and as the buyback and hand-in program works, they will be removed from the streets of New Zealand and make it safer.
The gun changes have come as no surprise to the Deerstalkers Association. Its spokesperson Bill O'Leary says it will come as an enormous disappointment to many of its members who legally hold semi-automatic weapons and are recreational shooters.
But certainly we do have people within New Zealand Deerstalkers Association who do hold these firearms, have been legal up to this point, and now will be obviously disappointed.
Federated Farmers supports the changes, saying not many farmers need semi-automatic military-style weapons. Its firearms safety spokesperson is Miles Anderson.
We recognise that there had to be change so that there could be no more repeats of the atrocity that happened in Christchurch. We support the changes the government's announced.
While it's 24 years coming after the Thorpe report recommended similar changes, Kevin Clements from the National Centre for Peace and Conflict at Otago University welcomed the move.
It's a pity that it's taken a tragedy to get the government mobilised around it, but it's definitely to be applauded. It will make New Zealand a safer place, and there are already more than enough different kinds of weapons available to hunters and farmers and sportsmen, so that they can have their weapons and use them in a safe place. But it removes a category of weapons which are capable of enormous lethal violence.
But Professor Clements says he thinks the government should go further.
I would have liked to have seen some registration of firearms to people, but I guess that's a long way down the track. In the short term, it seems to me that not issuing any more E-category licenses for such weapons is really helpful. Buying back these weapons will be good, and I'm hoping that people that have them and are not using them, or as an act of honouring the victims, will voluntarily renounce them and give them back to the police in an amnesty.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says legislation will be introduced in the first week of April and changes to the Arms Act are expected to pass within the next session of Parliament. For Checkpoint, ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
Let's go live now to Christchurch and our reporter Nita Blake-Person.
Kia ora, Lisa. Yes, I'm joining you tonight from Latimer Square, where a vigil has just got underway for those victims of last Friday's attacks. Hundreds of people have turned out here tonight for hymns, songs and a time of remembrance. People have poured in from all over Christchurch and I'm sure further afield. Earlier today I met with a group of members of the Auckland Muslim community who had come from Auckland to pay their respects and gratitude to the police and first responders from last Friday's attacks. Bashir Ramad Khan today brought gift baskets for those on the front line, and he told me if it weren't for their heroic actions, more lives would have been lost.
We're very fortunate in a country like New Zealand where this tragedy happened and nobody wants it and nobody's prepared for it. But when you really look at the days that followed after, on the day and the days that followed, it happens. They manage themselves so professionally, our police, our ambulances, and in doing so, including our medical team, in doing so, they have actually saved so many more lives. And today the numbers would have been worse off, but it's not the case. It reminds me of an incident that actually happened with my community, and there's a reason behind why we're here and why we're looking at those people who've done so much. And it reminds me of a situation in Pakistan where my community in Lahore faced similar tragedy where over 100 people were killed in 2 mosques. It's coincident, but it's what happened, and the terrorists attacked and killed over 100 people. But they never received this support. They never received this compassion from the public and the outpouring of love and unity. They had to fend for themselves, and the perpetrators today are still at large. Nothing happened, and the community had to gather together to help themselves and make a move on with their lives. We have 2 of those members in New Zealand, and it was interesting how they compared what happened to them and how New Zealand got together and basically stood as one and basically had a very simple message that hatred does not belong in this country. And that's the most important and reassuring thing that I've seen in the last few days.
And what was the response when you arrived here from these first responders to see you and to see your gratitude?
They were most humbled. They did not expect it, and neither do they wanted it. But I said, no, it's what we would like to do. It's a very small token of our appreciation. We'd love to do more. And they normally get missed out. They're the people who work 24/7 trying to help keep us safe, keep us alive, and they do so much. But we sometimes fail to recognize that and appreciate that. And I thought this is probably very timely for someone to stand up. And I feel so fulfilling in my heart that we've been able to do this.
He is finally resting in peace. Those were the words of Haji Daoud Nabi's son after he buried his father today. Haji Daoud was the first person to be shot by the gunman. He's widely known as the man who greeted him at the entrance to the Al Noor Mosque with those words, "Hello, brother." That was right before the gunman opened fire and stormed through into the mosque. Today, Haji Daoud's family and friends, flanked by hundreds of supporters, held signs painted with those words as he was laid to rest in Christchurch. His son, Yama, invited our reporter, Katie Scotcher, to attend, record and report on that burial.
Haji Daoud Nabi's Muslim brother welcomed the hearse carrying his body as it entered the cemetery. A motorcade of motorcycles followed. Haji Daoud Nabi's body, wrapped in white linen, was slowly removed from the vehicle. Dozens of his family and friends held and comforted each other as they watched on. They slowly followed his body into the large white marquee set up on the grounds. Members of the Muslim community watched from afar. His family circled his body, Muslim sisters on one side and brothers on the other. As with the other burials, after a short time, the large crowd of Muslim brothers watching on were encouraged to enter the tent to pray. Many of them have never met Haji Daud, but have travelled thousands of miles to support their community. Once the women were ushered inside, as per Muslim tradition, they prayed.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
Haji Daud's body was carried to the burial site. The large crowds followed. Only his immediate family were there as his body was placed in the ground. His body, like other Muslims, was placed facing the direction of Mecca. A wooden board was placed over his body. Those standing above the grave sprinkled dirt on top. And just like that, Haji Daud Nabi was finally at peace.
I'm happy that Dad had, rest in peace. So that's what I wanted. I didn't want, anything from anyone. Just want Dad to rest in peace.
Yama Nabi has been helping to arrange the funeral since his father's body was released earlier this week. Reflecting on the burial, Yama said the support for his father showed just how loved he was.
There was a lot of support behind Dad. There was the bikies were there, and she showed Dad that he loved his bike and Harley Davidson, Triumph and like that. Because so that to show Dad that the people out there, they do care about him.
It is incredibly rare for media to be invited to a Muslim burial. Only RNZ and Al Jazeera were given permission to enter the cemetery today. Yama says he invited us because he wants New Zealand to learn.
To show that we've got heart like everyone else. I've been here 30 years. I'm a Muslim, I'm a Cantabrian, and to show New Zealand that who we are one.
Now that his father has been put to rest, Yama says he will now focus on his family.
I have to stay strong for my mum now, that I can't, leave my mum. I have to be strong for my mum, my brother, my sister, my wife, my kids, and be strong for Canterbury as well,
Hundreds of people filed in and out of the cemetery as the bodies of some of the victims were buried today. Tomorrow they will file in and out again as the burials continue. I o tau tahi mo te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Katie Scott Turaho.
And Katie's package with that footage from the burial today will be available online and through the Checkpoint Facebook page. Well, tomorrow will mark a week since the terror attack which killed 50 people and wounded 50 others. Tens of thousands of flowers from bouquets and wreaths to bunches from home gardens line the wall in the nearby Botanic Gardens, not far from here in Latimer Square. Earlier today I went there to ask people what those floral tributes mean to them.
Just showing our respect to the community. I'm still lost for words. I still can't believe it happened. It's been such a shock to know that sort of thing can happen here. I mean, you hear about it all around the world, but not here in Christchurch. Yeah.
What's your response seeing this today?
Oh, amazing. My husband, unfortunately, has got dementia, and he thinks it's all related to the war. He can't comprehend now what's gone on, but I thought it would be nice for him to come down and see it as well. It's something he can take in. Whether he gets the right meaning of what it's all about, that's beside the point. It's just, we can sort of show our support to them and hopefully never happens again.
I've travelled in from Methven, which is an hour away, and I guess because this is going to stay part of our history forever, it's a chance to just make sure you've been part of it. And being away from Christchurch, you can kind of not really appreciate how big a thing it is, but standing here gives you that appreciation. So that's probably the main reason.
Yeah. What's your response been seeing it now?
slightly overwhelmed, and I guess it's just being a mum of 2 kids. You hope that my kids never have to understand what we are having to learn to understand. So it just, puts it a bit into perspective.
Yeah. We've been travelling to New Zealand now for more than a year. We're on a working holiday visa, and we were on our way to Christchurch anyway. So we were passing through Kaikoura the day that obviously the sad attack happened. But it didn't keep us from coming, because unfortunately we come from a land or a country or a nation in Europe where we have had a lot of terror attacks already. And the first ones that we know that we had really shook our world as well as it does everybody's. But you know what, unfortunately you have to keep going on, and I think it's an important message to show the world that you can't live in fear, although it's really sad what's happened now, obviously. And then we passed by here a few days ago and we paid our respects. But now we're on our way to go to the next stop, really, so make our way, drive down. And one of our good friends who is a Muslim comes from the Muslim community in Antwerp. And her family is called Bensliman, and for them it shook them as well. They're really believing Muslims, practicing, good working, hard working people, and it really affected them as well. So they asked us, can you go buy a flower in their name and can you go put it there? So we did. It's the world is one, so that's what you do. It really doesn't matter where you're from or what your color is, what your belief is. It's all about, unfortunately, what's happened has happened, but I think that this really proves that it's never going to win. It's never going to win, because love is stronger. So, and as long as the answer is this, then I believe that it makes it for us as well. We've travelled through New Zealand now for a long time, and it is a wonderful nation. It's really sad that it's happened here, but I think it goes to show that it's a very, very strong country.
And that's all from us tonight on Checkpoint. We'll leave you from Latimer Square, where people are still pouring into the memorial service taking place here. We'll be back tomorrow from 5 o'clock. Until then, have a lovely night.
Sweeping gun control changes have been announced by the Prime Minister today, including a ban on all military-style semi-automatic weapons and assault rifles. Jacinda Ardern also says a nationwide reflection for those killed in the Christchurch terror attack will be held tomorrow in the form of a nationwide broadcast of the Muslim call to prayer at 1:30, followed by 2 minutes silence. Our next news will be at 7.
Tonight on Nights, Richard Scott is on the trial of a con man. Alison Ballance goes to Auckland Zoo.